Listen well, for I tell you a story that happened when the world still listened to warnings. In our village lived two boys who grew up like brothers. Aru was kind, the kind that made people stop their work just to smile at him. He fished every dawn, shared his catch with the hungry, and never kept a coin he didn't need. Then there was Kano. Kano watched Aru from the corners of his eyes, counting every praise, every grateful nod, every time a girl's face lit when Aru passed. One evening, as Aru carried fish to the widow's house, Kano sat beneath the palm tree, his smile sharp as broken glass. Good men always get lucky, he whispered to himself, until they don't. That whisper was the first seed of darkness. It took root quietly, the way poison spreads through water, slowly, invisibly, deadly. 3 days before the wedding, Aru received terrible news. His closest friend, the one he'd grown up with, the one who knew his heart, was about to lose everything. The bride's family demanded a bride price he could never afford. Without it, the marriage would dissolve into shame and debt. That night, Aru lay awake, his mind racing like trapped birds. He had almost nothing. His fishing barely fed him. Yet his friend's life was crumbling, and Aru felt the weight of it crushing his chest. By midnight, desperation had made a decision he couldn't unmake. He would walk the forbidden path at dusk, the path to the crossroads where spirits lingered and the living never stayed after dark. Maybe, just maybe, he would find something there, something to sell, something to save his friend. The sun fell like a stone that evening. Aru's feet carried him toward the crossroads, even as his spirit screamed warnings. The village elders had always said, the crossroads belong to the dead after dusk. No living person should linger there. But hunger, loyalty, and fear pushed him forward. As he approached, the wind died completely. Even the insects fell silent. The world held its breath. Then he saw it, a golden ring, gleaming in the dust like a star that had fallen from the sky. It lay exactly at the center of the crossroads, as if placed there deliberately. Aru's heart pounded. His hands shook as he bent down. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But his friend's face appeared in his mind. He reached down. His fingers closed around the ring. The moment the ring touched his skin, it was warm. Not the warmth of the sun, but the warmth of something alive. Something that had been waiting to be held. Aru ran home, his lungs burning, the ring heavy on his finger despite its size. He told no one. He hid it beneath his sleeping mat. But as the night deepened, whispers followed him. Soft voices that weren't quite words, just a shape of words. The ring grew warmer on his finger, pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Aru tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, his body went cold. The whispers stopped. The silence was worse than any sound. Then a knock, gentle at first, then insistent. Not angry, not loud, but patient, like something that had been waiting a very long time and could wait forevermore. Aru's hands trembled as he opened the door. What he saw froze the blood in his veins. They stood in the darkness outside, pale figures, their edges blurred like smoke. A woman in a cloth that belonged to another century. A child who couldn't have been more than 7. An old man whose eyes held centuries of sorrow. They didn't speak. They simply watched Aru with an intensity that made him feel completely seen, as if every lie he'd ever told, every unkind thought, was written across his skin. The woman tilted her head slowly. One of the figures, the old man, opened his mouth. His voice came out like wine through a broken house. Aru! Just his name. But it carried the weight of something unfulfilled, something that had been waiting for him specifically. Aru tried to scream, but terror had stolen his voice. He slammed the door shut and ran to find the blind elder. Everyone in the village went to the elder. Not because she had sight, but because her blindness let her see what others couldn't. When Aru arrived, gasping and wild, she was waiting. The ring, she said before he could speak. You found the ring at the crossroads. Aru nodded, then realized she couldn't see. Yes, he whispered. The elder's face grew very still. That ring is a burial token. It belongs to a soul that died with broken promises. Promises someone made and never kept. The dead cannot rest until those promises are returned. Now they will follow you until you make it right. She gripped his arm. You must give the ring back. Aru, and soon. But Kano had been watching from the shadows outside. He heard everything. His eyes glinted with something hungry, something that looked like opportunity. He smiled the smile of a man who had just been handed a map to power. The next morning, Kano appeared at Aru's door with concern painted across his face. "Brother, you look terrible," he said, his voice dripping with false worry. "Are you sick? Let me sit with you." Aru, exhausted and terrified, was glad for company. Kano stayed all day, his smile never slipping, his hands always moving closer, his questions always probing. "Where did you go last night? You look like you haven't slept. Is something troubling you?" Each question was a rope drawing tighter. By evening, when Aru finally fell asleep from exhaustion, Kano's hand moved like a snake beneath the sleeping mat. The ring was there. He could feel it. His fingers closed around it. The moment the gold touched his skin, Kano felt a rush of power flood through him. Warm, intoxicating, irresistible. He slipped it onto his own finger and walked into the night, his heart hammering with dark joy. Within days, Kano was a different man. When he spoke, people listened. When he walked, they parted. He found money he never knew he had. The wealthiest merchant in the village suddenly wanted him as a business partner. Beautiful women who had never noticed him now smiled when he passed. The village began to whisper his name with respect. But the most terrible thing happened. The dead stopped visiting Aru. Instead, they began to knock at Kano's door. And when Kano wore the ring, he felt it. Felt them pulling at the edges of his mind. Felt their presence like hands trying to drag him somewhere he didn't want to go. He told no one. He pretended the knocking was the wind. He pretended the whispers weren't real. But every night, the ring grew warmer on his finger and the dead grew bolder. The village didn't understand what was happening. They only knew that Aru, who had always been blessed with kindness, suddenly seemed cursed with bad luck. Fish wouldn't bite his lines. People avoided his eyes. Whispers followed him. Is he sick? Why does he look so haunted? Maybe he did something terrible. Meanwhile, Kano's fortune grew like a weed in the rain. The same people who had praised Aru began to question his honesty. Where did he disappear that night? Why does he seem so afraid? The doubt was a slow poison, seeping into the village's heart. Then, one morning, a body was found at the Crossroads. One of the fishermen, cold and stiff, his eyes still open, staring at nothing. The village gasped. Fear settled over everything like ash. That night, the dead changed their approach. They no longer knocked politely at Kano's door. They hammered. They screamed soundlessly, their voices tearing through his mind like razors. Kano tried to remove the ring, but it wouldn't budge. It had tightened on his finger, the metal cutting into his skin. He could feel it burning, feel the ancestors' fury pressing against him like a physical weight. "Take it off," he screamed, but his fingers wouldn't obey. The dead were inside his mind now, showing him images, a broken promise, a young woman left at the altar, a child born without a father. Kano's body shook with terror and recognition. These weren't random spirits. These were people he had wronged in ways he'd forgotten he was capable of wronging. The ring pulsed, and with each pulse, Kano felt himself being pulled towards something inevitable. The elder called the village together. She spoke of the ring, of broken promises that echo across death itself. "The dead do not come for entertainment," she said, her blind eyes somehow seeing everything. "They come because something was never finished. The ring binds a soul's unfinished business to whoever wears it. But," she continued, her voice growing grave, "the ring also tests the wearer. It will burn on the hand of a liar. It will tighten on the hand of a thief. And it will pull toward judgment on the hand of one who chooses greed over mercy." The villagers understood then that something terribly wrong was happening. And when they looked at Kano, at the ring on his hand, at the terror in his eyes, they began to see not a blessed man, but haunted one. Under the pressure of the spirits and the weight of the village's suddenly knowing eyes, Kano broke. He came to the center of the village at dusk and confessed everything. He spoke his envy, his theft, his secret hatred of Aru. Words poured out of him like blood from a wound. "I took the ring," he cried, his voice raw. "I wanted what he had. I wanted people to look at me the way they look at him." But even as he confessed, something hardened in his heart. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg for mercy. He simply stood there, defiant, the ring burning on his finger. The spirits responded by falling silent. That silence was worse than any noise. It was the silence of a judgment being written. And Kano understood, in that moment, that words alone would never be enough. On the night before what everyone knew would be the final reckoning, the crossroads began to fill with shadows. Not ordinary shadows, but shapes that seemed to have intention, presence, weight. The dead gathered there in their dozens, their hundreds, their thousands. Villagers who ventured near reported feeling a cold that went past skin and bone, a cold that touched the soul itself. The air grew thick and difficult to breathe. Birds wouldn't fly overhead. Even the insects abandoned Crossroads. The village huddled in their homes, waiting. And then, as midnight approached, a voice, not quite a voice, but something that every person understood in their bones, called Aru's name. The fisherman rose from his bed and walked toward the crossroads, toward the gathering of the dead, knowing he would have to face what he had started when he picked up that ring. At the crossroads, the dead parted for Aru. In the center stood a figure brighter than the others, a woman made of moonlight, her face marked with sorrow and anger in equal measure. The spirits spoke through her, their collective voice both terrible and beautiful. "This ring belonged to me," the woman said. "I was promised a marriage. A man swore before God that he would love me forever. But he was like Kano. He wanted more, always more. He wanted a richer woman. He left me at the altar, and his betrayal broke my spirit before my body died. I have waited generations for someone to wear this ring and understand what it means to be broken by greed." The woman's eyes fixed on Kano, who had been pulled to the crossroads against his will. In her gaze, he saw himself, not as he wanted to be, but as he truly was. The ring on Kano's finger began to burn, not a small burn, but a searing, terrible heat that made him scream. With each lie he tried to tell, each denial, each excuse, the ring burned deeper, the metal sinking into his flesh. "It wasn't my fault," he cried, but the ring burned brighter. "I was jealous." Another burn. "I want to be like him." The burning intensified. The ring was forcing him to speak truth, to peel back every layer of denial, to expose the rotting core as greed and envy. The dead watched without mercy. The village watched from a distance, their faces stricken. And Aru watched his childhood friend being consumed by the consequences of his own choices, his heart breaking even as he understood justice was being done. Then the spirits turned their attention to Aru. They offered him something: safety, freedom. "Leave Kano to us," they whispered. "Walk away. Be free from the curse of the ring. Be free from our company. You have suffered enough." It would have been easy. Aru could have turned his back. Kano had stolen from him, lied to him, betrayed him. But as Aru stood there, watching his childhood friend burn, something in him refused. He thought of all the times Kano had been kind to him, and there had been kind times before the envy had poisoned everything. He thought of the boy Kano had been before greed rewrote him. "No," Aru said, his voice steady. "I won't leave him. He's done terrible things, but he's still human. I won't abandon him to the dark." The spirits fell silent. Even the dead, it seemed, could be surprised by mercy. Kano collapsed to his knees, broken and burning. Aru knelt beside him and forced him to speak the final truth, not out of anger, but out of something that looked almost like love. "Tell them," Aru whispered. "Tell them everything. Every betrayal, every theft, every moment of hatred. All of it. The only way out is through." And so Kano confessed with complete honesty. He confessed the envy, the theft of the ring, the lies he had told the village. He confessed that he wanted to be Aru so badly he had tried to erase him. The words came like vomit, painful and necessary. The village heard everything. By the time Kano finished, he was a hollow thing, emptied of all the poison that had filled him. The spirits listened, and when he was done, they offered one final choice. "The ring can be returned," the woman of moonlight said. "It can go back to the crossroads, back to the place of the broken promise. if you return it willingly. Kano, the burning will stop. The curse will leave you. You'll be free. The spirits paused. But freedom will come at a cost. You will always remember this night. You will always carry the shame. That is the price of being saved. Kano looked at his burning hand. He looked at Aru, who had refused to abandon him. He looked at the village, at the faces of people who would never trust him again. In that moment, standing at the edge of the abyss, Kano had to make a choice. Keep the ring and be consumed, or release it and live with the consequences. His hand trembled. The ring pulsed with fire. For a heartbeat, Kano hesitated. In that hesitation, he glimpsed another path, running into darkness, disappearing, keeping the ring and its power despite the cost. Greed whispered to him one final time, promising that he could somehow survive, somehow win. And Kano listened to that whisper. He stood up. His hand went to his pocket. He pulled out a knife and began to hack at the ring, try to cut his own finger to free it, try to escape not through mercy but through violence. No, the spirit screamed. You choose darkness. You choose greed. The earth beneath the crossroads began to split. Cracks spread outward like a spiderweb. The ground itself was opening, and Kano was falling towards something beyond sight, beyond hope. Aru reached for him, but it was too late. The final lie had sealed his fate. The dead poured toward Kano like a flood. They weren't cruel. They were simply claiming what greed had promised them. As they pulled him down, the ring slipped from his burning finger and fell through the air. It spun once, twice, 3 times, and then landed at Aru's feet. The ground sealed itself with sound like the world closing its eyes. Kano was gone. Not dead, exactly. The dead don't die twice. But he was gone from the world of the living, pulled down into whatever place the dead occupy, claimed by the ancestors as payment for his refusal to choose mercy over ambition. The spirits turned their gaze to Aru, who stood shaking, holding the ring that had cost him everything and everyone around him everything. With trembling hands, Aru walked to the exact center of the crossroads. The spirits parted for him, giving him space. The woman of moonlight watched as he knelt down and placed the ring back where it had begun. In the dust, at the center of the crossroads, returned to the place of the broken promise. As the ring touched the earth, something shifted in the world. A light spread outward, gentle and sad and peaceful. The woman's form began to glow, and her face, which had been marked with sorrow, began to soften. "Thank you," she whispered. "The promise is returned. I can rest now." One by one, the spirits faded, not disappearing, but becoming transparent, becoming light, becoming peace. By the time dawn broke, only Aru remained at the crossroads. The birds began to sing. The insects returned. The cold lifted like fog burning away under the sun. The world breathed again. Aru stood at the crossroads and understood that he paid an enormous price for one moment of desperation. But in paying it, he had also learned something the dead had tried to teach him all along, that mercy is stronger than judgment, that love is stronger than greed, and that what we choose in our darkest moments defines us far more than what we gain in our brightest ones. The elder was waiting for him when he returned to the village. She smiled, a smile that held all the wisdom of someone who had seen this story play out many times across many generations. "You chose right," she said simply. And though Aru's heart was broken, that knowledge made the breaking bearable. The village gathered as the sun rose fully. They had witnessed everything from their distant vantage point, had seen the earth open, had watched Kano disappear and the spirits fade. They fell silent when they saw Aru return, thin, hollow-eyed, but alive. The shame that had fallen on him lifted like a curse being broken. The same people who had whispered doubts began to speak of his courage. They brought him food, their eyes downcast with the guilt of having doubted him. His reputation, which Kano's jealousy had tried to destroy, was restored not through defense but through sacrifice. The wedding happened after all. Aru's friend married with joy instead of debt, and Aru sat at the ceremony with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the smile of someone who had survived the dark and chosen to return to the light. Years passed. The elder grew older still, and one evening she called Aru to her side. "I am ready to leave this world," she said. "But first, you must know one final truth. The crossroads will always remember what happened there. The ring will not appear again. I am certain of that. But a lesson remains, written into the earth itself. She took his hand. Tell the story, Aru. Tell everyone who will listen that what they take in secret will one day knock loudly at their door. Tell them that mercy is the only currency that never loses its value. Tell them, and perhaps fewer souls will be lost to their own greed. Aru promised. When the elder passed into the world of the dead, peacefully this time, he began to travel village to village, telling the story. And each time he told it, his heart remembered, and the telling was both blessing and wound. Decades later, on a dusk that felt like all the other dusks, a young traveler came to a crossroads exactly like the one in this story. The air was still, the insects were quiet, and there, in the dust, something glinted with golden light. The traveler's feet stopped. His heart began to race. His mind whispered the same temptations that had called to Aru and Kano. His family needed money. He deserved better. No one would ever know. His hand reached down. But then he heard it. A voice on the wind. The voice of 1,000 stories told around 1,000 fires. Greed borrows quietly, it whispered. But debt always knocks. The traveler pulled his hand back. He turned away from the ring, away from the crossroads, into the light of the fading day. And he walked on, carrying the lesson forward, unbroken.